you don't have a clear objective that all the stakeholders, all the people that are going to drive you crazy later have gotten a room and agreed on, then you don't know the end of the project at the beginning.
Welcome to the Disgruntled PM podcast, your weekly therapy session for the chaotic world of project management, transforming daily frustrations into real action. Welcome, everybody. I'm Trevor, the Disgruntled PM, joined today by my guest and professor. Is it Dr. William Stewart?
Technically, I'm a doctor, but I can only prescribe vitamins.
Well, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience?
Thanks, Trevor. It's an honor to be here. I've watched your stuff. You're a great interviewer. Thank you very much. My name is William Stewart, Bill for short. Right now, I guess my main job is I'm the founder and president of the IFPPM, Institute for Practical Project Management, an institute that builds on the PMI framework and provides more specific information on how to actually implement project management in real life, step by step.
So let's kick it off right there, because I know that one of your passions is reducing complexity, because that's the primary challenge for project management.
Exactly. Yeah, that's something I learned real early. I learned project management in aerospace. I thought I was going to be a professor. So I took a PhD in computer science, decided I didn't like that at all. Ended up working for a company that got gobbled up in all these mergers, this very large aerospace company, and got a whole bunch of mentoring from people that had spent decades building planes and satellites and stuff like that. And one of the things I realized was it was the work that was important, not the project management process. The project management process needed to come up with an accurate plan up front so that management could say, holy cow, yes, no, reduce the scope, add more money, make it faster, and then keep you on track. But it needed to be really light. And I think one of the instincts of a lot of smart systems-oriented people is they try to control complexity with more complexity. I'll have more controls, more touch points, more meetings, more checkpoints, more forms, more columns, more rows. And there's a huge cost to that because it starts to build up compounds and creating more complexity, takes away more time for you and for the actual team to get work done. So I was lucky enough. I started in 1992 at this aerospace company up here in Canada, but a small part of a huge American aerospace company. I was lucky enough to get trained in these fundamental best practices, which were exactly, by the way, the same fundamental best practices as Lee Lambert and company used to create the original version of the PMBOK, because that's where a lot of these lessons came from in controlling complexity, the work breakdown structure, for example, all that kind of stuff. And so complexity is the enemy. What we need to do is provide a small number of checkpoints and keys and steps that control the complexity enough so that if there's problems, you can see it early and manage it, but without taking too much time away from the team. So one of the ways I sometimes explain this is if you can picture a slalom ski course, one of those ski courses with flags, and you go around this flag and around that flag and around that flag. Those flags are not a meter apart. Those flags are, I'm not sure exactly what they are, let's say 40, 60 meters apart. But as long as you go around the right side of that one, and then the left side of that one, the right side of that one, you go down the middle of the course, go off into the trees or off the cliff. And that's what the key steps in project management are. I mean, no mystery stories, just quickly, the core, simple, practical thread. You can add lots more, but be careful. The core thread would be objective, business case, requirements, work breakdown structure deliverables, flowchart them, get the team to estimate them, roll up a critical path and a cost, add a risk budget. Just that. And if you do just that, sure, a lot of things will come up as you're going, but it'll be controlled enough that you'll be able to manage the complexity. So I was taught that in aerospace, worked there for 14 years, then became a management consultant and started teaching it. And of course, they say you never really understand something till you teach it. And I found that to be true. I ended up teaching it, I forget how many, it's more than 330 times now to something over more than 4,000 people. And in each of those courses, we would plan many projects. And a lot of the organizations I was dealing with were like nonprofits, Oxfam, Habitat for Humanity, a government department where there's 3 people in a comms department. Their project is 3 people, or an HR person. The project is 1 person. And so I realized that this streamlined complexity I was taught from aerospace needed to be streamlined down a little bit more to this core bare bones thread. And it really helped. It really worked. I got a lot of feedback. I put some courses up on Udemy. They ended up, I think at this point, they got a little over 150,000 students. Haven't checked recently. Got a lot of feedback. And they forced me, the students forced me to add additional value. So I published it as a book, a manual, and I got a lot of people saying, well, can you provide an example of this? Okay, practical, get it. Takes the PMBOK process and lays it out across the timeline, tells me exactly what I need to do. So you've got some examples in there. But can you give us a full project example? And I resisted that for years because that would be a lot of work. It'd be like going back into aerospace and doing some work. But I realized it really needed to be done to make it real. So my kids were into Harry Potter at the time. So I came up with a project called the Magical Devices Version 3 project. So the Magical Devices company is making magical devices. And as you can imagine, they're selling quite well because they're magical. Version 2. So they need a whole new plant. So I wanted to create a project that had a bunch of different domains in it. So, everybody could kind of relate to it, some complexity, some additional domains. So they got to create a new production plant. They're going to put hardware in there. They're going to put software in there. They're going to have to integrate it. They're going to have training. They're going to have support. There's a security aspect to it. Then they're going to have to deploy it. So I pretended it was real, and I started at the beginning with a charter with an objective. I did a business case. It looks like over a 5-year net present value, this is going to return a lot more than it costs. Did a set of requirements, came up with a work breakdown structure, a precedence diagram, flow charted it, pretended to do some estimates pretty fast. Put it in Microsoft Project, got a Gantt schedule, a critical path, cost roll up, and then I did a risk register. I'm really happy with the risk register in particular because that's often a bit of a black hole for people. So I put together a professional risk register. Here's the risks. Here's how bad they look before we do anything about them. Well, which ones should we focus on? What could we do about them? Here's our plan. Oh, look, all the numbers went down. They're less risky. Sounds great. Put that all together in the Magical Devices version 3 project. Put that out there, and then I made up a certification called the PPM, Practical Project Manager certification. And hundreds and hundreds of people started putting it on their LinkedIn. So I said, well, I've got to do this a little bit more seriously. So sorry for going on, but maybe this will provide a foundation. So then I established a Canadian federally registered nonprofit. It's a Canadian federally registered nonprofit. Paid for it all myself. It's about $30K so far. Money well spent. And we integrated in an exam site and, put in the WordPress plugin so we could host some courses. And so far it's got about 1,700 people signed up. So you can go and take the courses, download the resources, the flowcharts, the books. I decided to give away the books. It was time. I know it's my IP, but you register in the site, you click a button, you get the main book, you get the development methodologies book, you get the book on how to use Microsoft Office to put together a plan, put together your work breakdown structure, the Gantt schedule, stuff like that. All free, completely free. And if you choose, you can pay all of $40 and you get the courses and you can take the exam and get a DPPM certification, deeply practical project manager certification. So what I'm really trying to do is help people around the world, project managers around the world. That's why the price is nominal. We got a great advisory board from around the world. Um, Nigeria, Mexico, Jamaica, Russia, of all places, UK. And we're trying to provide really practical stuff for people that need to manage a project like right now. Here's how to do it. Here's an example that you could reuse. If you just do this stuff and not a lot more, you'll probably end up, as I often say, I don't guarantee success, but things will turn out as well as they're going to. So that's, sorry about that. That's the background.
That's the professor in you, the teacher that just
Yes.
you wind you up and you keep going.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I famously joke that the best professor that I ever had was during my undergrad, and he was also the most impressive one I've ever seen. He would teach two history classes. He walked in just in whatever he was wearing, nothing in his hands, would teach an hour and a half lecture with sidebars. Like he would launch into a side story about the most random things, get right back on topic, end on time, and walk out. And he did that. He had 2 classes that he did that for, and they weren't memorized lectures because some of those side stories you just can't, those are not the same stories you tell every semester.
That guy was a project manager.
No, he was a history teacher.
History teacher, yeah. The ending on time, that really impresses me.
Well, I think the ending on time was he had something else. He wanted to go golf or do with something else. So he was just like, I'm walking in, I'm doing my hour and a half lecture, and I'm walking right out.
Right on.
But yeah, so that just reminded me of that's like, thinking back, that's one of the most impressive things I've ever seen from a collegiate professor, because he didn't have notes. He didn't have anything. He just walked in, did it off the top of his head, launched into tangential side stories of the most random things, like how he passed out in one of his classes at UCLA. And then later on, once they took him to the hospital, it turned out he was just really drunk.
Oh, no. Oh, my.
But, so one of the things, like you were talking about Lee Lambert, he's actually a prior guest. I'm sure you know that.
I saw the show, loved it.
Yeah. And I really do think that when you talked about the simplicity part, with Six Sigma, process improvement, lean, all those different synonymous terms, one of the things that I think a lot of people get wrong is they don't incorporate nudge theory into their practices.
Mm-hmm. Tell me.
And well, nudge theory is, it's an economic term, but it was coined that you create a system so that people say yes. So it's easier to make people say yes to things. So when you build your system should reduce the friction of the human element of getting your team to do what you need them to do. I.e., if I want my team to show up to a daily meeting, I need to make it at a time when everybody I know has walked through the door. Like if you're having a daily stand-up, one of the reasons they're in the mornings often is because you get in, you check your email, you get yourself caught up for the day. Oh, now it's time for the daily stand-up. You haven't gotten into deep work. You haven't gotten busy doing other things yet.
Right.
If you made that daily stand-up at 11 a.m., people are going to be doing things. They're going to be out and about, milling around the office, whatever it is. If you make it at noon or 12:30, you're assuming everybody goes to lunch at the same time, but not everybody does. So you want to make that nudge theory of setting up a system so that it makes sense for everybody around you to say yes as easy as possible.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. If I can just build on that with something similar.
Please.
Um, During monitoring and control, one of the things I say is there's really only four key things that you need to do. You got your weekly heartbeat meeting, your issue status meeting. You've got your monthly heartbeat and you want to have that happen every month so that not too much has gone wrong, and ask for help. Let them know how much of the risk budget is gone. Have as many people in that room as possible. You want that monthly heartbeat, that monthly project review. You want to manage the scope creep, of course, anything that comes along, get the team together, find out the surprising things it's impacting, put it forward, hope they say no. That much, forget it. And have some level of agility, no matter what you're doing, some level of iteration, drafts on a document with reviews. Those key things, weekly heartbeat, monthly heartbeat, control the scope creep, and have some iteration to find out things you didn't get up front and get it right. Those are the keys. Now, when it comes to the weekly heartbeat, it's kind of related, not exactly the same as what you're saying, but made me think of it. One of the things I try to do to convince people to hold these is I tell a little story like this. I say, okay, now how many people have said or heard what I'm about to say? I will admit I have said this. Here's where projects go wrong, everybody. Um, Hey, Jane, do we have to hold our weekly meeting this week? I don't know, Bill. We know where all the issues are, don't we? Yeah, I agree. Tell you what, let's get some work done this week instead of meeting. And then you don't know what you don't know. And then I tell a story once about one of my integration leads. I heard him say that in the hallway, just lucked out, went out and said, Doug, be 5 minutes. Be 5 minutes, 1 hour max, but it can be 5 minutes, but please get in the room. He was managing contractors all over North America. He came out an hour later because he found things he didn't know. So you need to make it simple. And one of the ways you make that simple is you promise them it'll never be more than an hour. If you're not finished talking at the end of an hour, you say, okay, folks, we can do some side meetings, but that's it for today. I'll see you next week. I like your image of one of the project manager's job, or I guess any leader's job, is to remove the points of friction to make it easy for the team to take the channels that will create success. Yeah, I agree.
Well, it's not just the team though. It's I say PMs as a trade, our job is to be a conduit of information upstream and downstream.
Uh-huh.
Because just like I want my team to glide along with the path that I'm creating for them, I need the executive leadership to glide along the path that I need them to do too. Because if the team is going in one direction and then I'm not managing the stakeholders and leadership to say, let's all get on the same page, the team can be running right up, it can be doing exactly everything right. And they're going the opposite direction of where the stakeholders are pushing because I'm not guiding them either.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. You got to have that alignment, or it could be a lot of work in the wrong direction.
Now, I want to step back for a minute because you mentioned the heartbeat meetings. I've never heard that term before. Can you explain what that is?
Sure. I must say, I often say that none of what the IFPPM has or in my courses or books or anything are my idea. They're really not. They're best practices. A lot of it goes back to Lee Lambert stuff. I remember, I think it was version 3 of the PM book when I opened that up and I saw all this stuff that was familiar to me. However, I do think I probably coined that term, heartbeat. And the
Okay.
reason I named it that is because if you skip those meetings, the heart of the project dies. The heart stops beating. And the most important monitoring and control tool that you have is simply to get the core team, not the whole team, just the core team, your key leads together. 1 hour max, absolutely promise to. And what I always did, and I worked on very large projects. The largest project that I ever managed myself had responsibility for was 55 million. And all we would ever do is go over the issues list in that heartbeat meeting, because everything else would take care of itself. There was scope issues, schedule issues, risk issues. They would come up. What are the issues that are cross team that aren't solved that people need help with? And 1 hour max. So I would sell that to people. I would say if it's a 40-hour week, 1 hour is less than 2.5%. Well, it's exactly 2.5% of your week. If it's a 37 or a 35-hour week, which some organizations are, especially government organizations, it's still less than 2.8% of your week. It's very, very cheap insurance to take 2.5 to 2.8% of the week in that heartbeat meeting to make sure you're on top of things. So for the most part, you can leave people alone the rest of the week and wait for them to come to you with problems and fires. And everybody is relatively free to go deal with those. So that heartbeat it just keeps the project going. There's a lot of things that take care of themselves. If you have a precedence diagram, a flow chart of the deliverables created by the core project team, PM does it himself. They deserve what happens to them. Got the core project team together, 3 meetings minimum usually, to improve those two documents, and then you have that heartbeat meeting once a week. Now, monthly, I also call it the monthly heartbeat because it's also extraordinarily important. Because the key measure of how a project is doing is really how much of the risk budget is left. If you're a third of the way through the project, let's say halfway through the project, and you've got 3/4 of your risk budget left, you're probably fine. Probably fine.
You never know. That one
Yeah,
that one massive risk can come back and bite you.
that's
But
very true. Yes.
there's a couple of things I want to stress and kind of emphasize that you said that really stuck out to me about those heartbeat meetings. The first one is you highlighted the core team or your core leaders, meaning, as I've had many guests talk about, not everybody needs to be in the room in the meetings, and you need to manage some of these meetings like they're a guest list at the most exclusive club on the planet. Don't have the people that's going to don't have that leader that doesn't need to be there that's going to take you off topic in the room because he wants to be in the room. And the other one is you said you go over issues, and and I'm assuming as the PM in you separated issues from risks, because issues are things that are present, have happened, and are currently happening versus risks where they're fortune telling at best.
Exactly. Yeah, I completely agree. If I could pick up on that. I noticed this pattern in these classes that I was teaching. Teaching was just so useful. Probably about a third of most of the classes I teach are free form. I build in the time. They ask questions. It's been a long time since I've heard a new question, but it happens every once in a while. And it's so tremendously useful. I found a common pattern in a lot of the organizations I dealt with, which was they didn't know who the core team was, and the project manager didn't have the 2 A words. I made this one up too. The PM has to have the 2 A words. The account
Wait. I was going to say, I can think of a couple of A words.
productive and constructive A words. The accountability and the authority to assure project success. And one of the ways to do that, so what I usually do is when some question comes up so I say, okay, well, here's one of the first things I recommend you do. Open up Microsoft PowerPoint, I call up the hierarchy chart, insert SmartArt hierarchy, the org chart tool. And a lot of people haven't seen that. That's so easy. I lines up all, moves the boxes around by itself. It takes not very much time. Then I put the sponsor or customer at the top. I say, you're not at the top. You're not at the top. Sponsor, customer, sponsor/customer. There's some nuance there, but not you. Then you, and then your core team. Who is your IT lead? Who is your procurement lead? Who is your legal lead? Who is your facilities lead? Who are those people? You can't manage a department. You can't manage the facilities department. You need to know who is the person from that department that knows those people that will manage that team. And then I say things like, you don't have to ask HR's permission for this. If there's any HR people in the room, oh, what? I said, you're not realigning annual review lines. You're putting together a project organization chart. And the people on that third level, the core team, they don't even have to be in your organization, because a lot of the organizations I deal with, some of their people are like regulatory agencies, or in some other
Or
province.
contractors.
Contractors, exactly. Who is the person from the contractor? You can't manage a contractor. Who is the person? And what that little org chart does is, first of all, it makes it clear that you're the project manager. It's just a very subtle background signal to people. But second, you get that out to everybody, put it up in your cubicle wall, put it in SharePoint, email it around. The rest of the team sees who the other core team members are. It starts to create a team. This is the core team. And then those are the people you have to get in the room or around a shared whiteboard when you define the deliverables, and most importantly of all, flowchart them where the truth comes out. That core team is just so critical. So many things get solved after that. I've had so many project managers tell me they don't know how to move forward in the process. And when I ask questions, one of the things I realize is they don't have a core team. They're dealing with the IT department and nobody will listen to them. Well, that's the first thing to fix. Who is the person in the IT department you will talk to and will be in that meeting, that monthly heartbeat?
Or they're dealing with a different person every time they have a problem. And then guess what? Nobody has the single source. Nobody is the single point of failure, where I know we coach not to have those, but for, like you said, for the core team and for that org chart, you kind of need somebody to be that single point of failure for, whether it's responsibility, accountability. I think you said authority, and what was the other one?
Those are the key.
Authority and accountability.
Yeah.
You know, the idea, I really like that idea of building the project org chart. And I know it's not revolutionary or new, but one of the things that we learn in this profession after being in it, if you've been in it for any amount of time, there's no new ideas. There's just somebody mentioning an old idea that you forgot about because you haven't used it.
Exactly. And there's such a small number of these critically important ideas. I mean, you can do a network capacity analysis, you can do environmental studies, depending on the project, depending on the things that you need to do. But starting at the beginning, if you don't have a clear objective, maybe some assumptions, constraints, critical success factors, that's kind of flavorish. If you don't have a clear objective that all the stakeholders, all the people that are going to drive you crazy later have gotten a room and agreed on, then you don't know the end of the project at the beginning. So you don't really know what you're aiming at if you don't have that. And then once they hand the charter to you, if you haven't been involved in the charter, and often you're not, although you should be, according to best practice. But once you get the charter, here's the objective. Here's what we want you to do. Here's our guess on schedule and budget. It's a guess. I'll get back to you at the end of planning. We'll know for sure, but thank you. I'll aim at that. The next thing you need to do is create that core project team. So, and then you can do requirements, work breakdown structure with the core project team, flow chart those deliverables. It is, I still get a kick when I teach this. We use the magic PM tool, if you can all get in a room, of the square post-it note here. And we start flow charting. They all flow
Hmm.
chart. There's usually three to five projects per class. Often they're real projects, like deploy a UN mission to Haiti for the RCMP or whatever, real projects. To see them flowchart that, it's so beautiful to see all the lights go on as they realize what it'll take to get that project done. There's dependencies there they hadn't thought about. And they always, every project, I always ask them afterwards, after they do the flowchart, okay, so how many people ended up realizing you needed to add more deliverables to your work breakdown structure? All the hands go up because the flowchart brings that out. Yeah, that the core project team, there's a small number of really important ideas. Much if you could craft the, importance, there's some of them that are really important. and that's definitely one of them. And then a lot of things start to take care of themselves. Like some little things like there must be one-to-one correspondence between the people that plan the project and implement the project. You can't have John plan the deliverables, the flowchart, the precedence diagram, and have Jim come along and be responsible for doing it later. Because the first thing that John's going to do is make it easy. Oh, this is easy. It's not tough at all. First thing Jim is going to say is, I don't know what John was thinking, and that this is crazy, and I don't feel a responsibility to try to make this schedule and budget work because it's not mine. When you have that one-to-one correspondence, even if they were wrong on their estimates, et cetera, and they're always wrong, everyone's always wrong. That's the case. But if it was theirs, they were the core project team that planned it. It's their project. They will try as best as possible to make their own plan work. So yeah, that's one of the biggest things of all. And you know, to make so many of these things real, Trevor, it's so easy. And so I say to people, and I can see the resistance often in classes. I try to talk them into this. I say, one of the first things you do is just go open up Microsoft PowerPoint, like I'm going to do right now. Let's just do a quick one. It's only going to take us 60, 120 seconds. And then identify those people and then email it around to them. That little tool, that little vehicle, that little technique of opening up PowerPoint and creating that little org chart, that by itself solves so many problems. You realize, you know, I don't know who my IT lead is. Let me go talk to the director of IT or whatever and say, you know, I need one person on my core team. Who can it be? Who should it be? Could it be John? I've worked with him before or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's a great place to pause and tell everyone about the Patreon and remind them that that exists, because that's how the audience can help support the show financially, because everybody's supporting the show right now by listening. But the Patreon has the post-mortem interviews, which are bonus conversations with every guest, including Bill, who not sure if he knew he was signing up for that when he said yes to this, but he is. And in that, we're going to be discussing the what versus how problem and a little bit about forcing management to choose their own priorities, because those are some very important topics. And I think he's got some experience in those. And it's only $5 a month for that tier to be able to support the show and get access to expertise from every one of my guests. So there's a lot of value in that. So going back to what you were talking about the project org chart and the flow charts with the post-it notes, one of the things that sticks out to me about that is when you start saying, can I be included on this meeting? If you're not, like, if let's say the core team is the third tier, if you're on the fourth or fifth tier of the org chart, you know, that should tell you right there I don't want to say importance, but your need to know of information to be there. And that's a way to control those meeting invites by looking at that org chart and saying, what level of audience do we need for this meeting? And then you go from there based off of the priority of who needs to be there, whether it's a team specific meeting, whether it's a core team meeting, whether it's a project wide meeting, you know, all those different things. You use that almost like the guest list to determine who comes to meetings and who doesn't. And then you don't have to worry about telling people no, because then you just say, are you on this tier of the list for this meeting? No. Okay. You don't need to be there.
Yes, absolutely. And if I can pick up on that, so one of the ways I try to communicate that concept is I tell people, because I know a lot of people are skeptical about hierarchies and org charts, is I'll say to people, now, if we want to get things done, we do need org charts. We do need hierarchies. Now, I agree, hierarchies can be used to distribute power in disproportionate and unproductive ways. I do agree with that. However, if we want to get things done, we need to know who's got the responsibility to make a decision. And if we've got a problem, who do we kick it upstairs to make a decision? So it can't be two bosses, for example. We need to have an org chart. A sports team has one coach, one general manager, one president. And so for that weekly heartbeat meeting, if you know who your core team members are, the way I always do it is I leave it up to them to decide if they want to bring someone else into the meeting. So, for example, my IT lead or my facilities or integration or hardware or network or training or support lead, if they've got an issue that Jane is working on and wants Jane in that meeting, and let's say John is the IT lead, and Jane's responsible for the network capacity, and there's a problem there. I would hope John would want Jane in that meeting and not pretend to be the expert in that. Bring Jane into that meeting. So hierarchies, if they're used appropriately, if they're supportive hierarchies, if there's servant leadership in the language of Agile, be very clear on what the goal is, provide the resources for the team, and then flip the org chart upside down. Bring me your problems. Let me know what you need so that I can help and support you. And you demonstrate that, you show that, then the org chart can be used in a very productive way. And I apologize for another tangent. I got to tell you this one. One of the things that I just am so impressed by is Alan Mulally, the guy that saved Ford before the 2008 financial crash when it was losing $17 billion a year and ended up being the only North American car company that did not need a government bailout. And there's many famous stories about him, but one of the things he says is the idea that you should never bring your boss a problem unless you can also bring a solution at the same time is wrong. Absolutely wrong. It's a symptom of a punitive, non-transparent, dysfunctional culture. And when he walked into Ford, that's what he found. That's why they were losing $17 billion a year. And he tells a famous story about he finally convinced them to tell him at his project reviews when a project was red or an element was red. Finally, one guy had the guts to do it. Next meeting, he had that guy sit beside him and managed to solve it. So we need hierarchies. We need org charts. We need to know who to flow a problem to, who's providing direction, but it's got to be done in a functional, transparent, supportive, servant leadership fashion, and then the team will follow you. They up to a certain point, you can get by being a mean boss, but it's not very high. You're going to have to be respected, and then they will follow your leadership if they see that you are a true servant leadership. And then the org chart, in turn, flowing down, will start to work for you.
Well, I'll throw a little bit of a argument to that Alan Mulally comment about don't always, I know that there's the saying of always if you're going to bring your boss a problem, bring a solution. And I do agree with that. I'll say 80% of the time that if you know what the problem is, odds are a version of fixing it, whether that's I need more resources, I need more time, I need more resources, more time, more longer schedule, something. But also, if you don't know what the solution is, that's when you don't bring a solution, you bring a question of what do you see as a solution to this? Because there's no absolute, we always talk about there's no absolutes. They're called best practices. But I'm of the opinion that you should always have a solution. And if you don't have a solution as you're presenting a problem, be prepared to eat that humble pie and say, here's my problem. I don't know what it is. Can you help me or assign somebody to help me? Because we never know if there's that lead engineer that we need who's the person, the master that's the right-hand person of the CTO. And if you've got a problem in the beginning and you present it and say, can Steve come look at this for an hour of his time? That hour and that ask now could save you needing Steve for a whole day in 6 months because you didn't ask, because it festered, it became technical debt, it blew up, and then it only became apparent once everybody had to see it, whereas before you could cover it.
Exactly. It's so funny, Trevor, as you're describing that hypothetical example, that's almost exactly the story that Alan tells. He's in this meeting, and finally this guy, Mark Shields, he's got a problem with the back part of a truck, the actuator. I'm not sure I know what that is, but it was a problem. And they couldn't ship the trucks because it wasn't fixed, and they didn't have a solution. He finally gets the guts to put up the red, and he says, I've got this problem, and we don't know what the solution is. So as Mullally tells the story, he says, well, has anyone else got any ideas or suggestions that could help? And as Alan tells the story, so-and-so from so-and-so says, yes, actually, we've run into that before. We've got a couple of engineers that know exactly how to deal with that. I'm almost saying what you just said. And we'll get those sent up to your site. And another guy says, you'll need some quality engineers just to make sure the backfitting goes well. I've got a couple of people that dealt with similar things. We'll send them up. Okay, great. Let's move on with the meeting.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And but everybody's afraid to admit that there's a problem that we don't know. And I think that, even if you don't have the solution, bringing the problem and then saying, does anybody have any input, in a way is a solution, because you're at least just saying, here's my problem, help me, which is more than most people do, because they'll just throw up a red status and gloss over it like it's nothing and move on, when in reality it's a showstopper and we don't talk about it because we don't want to talk about the red.
Exactly. One of the ways I try to explain that is I say, this is why bosses exist. uh, to provide the goal, clarity in the goal, but then to help with the problems the team cannot. And sometimes what the boss does when you bring in that problem, they just kick it upstairs one higher and to someone else. And I was telling this story for a Habitat for Humanity. And they said, yeah, I've got an example of that. They needed some sort of permit for the building a house or something like that, and they couldn't solve the problem. The project manager took it up. It went up to the CEO. CEO couldn't solve it. Was phoning across to the city to get the permit. Didn't happen. But they happened to have a donor, a major donor. You know, he dropped $100,000 in on a Monday, who had a personal relationship with the mayor. So they kicked it
Hmm.
up to him. And he talked to the mayor, and a week later, the problem was solved. So this is, I mean, the hierarchy is not just to flow things down, it's to flow things up. And then I think going back to your comment earlier on about managing down and managing upwards, I think that's one of the most important functions of the project managers. Don't put ego first. See your bosses as resources, as part of your team, really, to help the project be successful.
Well, and one thing that I think everyone forgets is promotion to leader means you are supposed to be thinking strategic and not execution. We, in the project professional world, everybody thinks, oh, it's a natural progression from project to program to portfolio to PMO lead. But not as many people are, in the profession, people talk about it, but when you make that leap from project to program, you might as well be starting a whole new career, because you're reprogramming your brain in the way you think about going from execution at the fundamental level of project to now you're thinking strategically, and you're no longer involved in the day to day. You're involved in month to month, year to year, so to speak. And at the project level, when you present problems or situations, things that look huge as red flags to you, when you're talking about to somebody that understands the whole strategy, the whole ad campaign, everything, they could look at that and say, doesn't matter, don't worry about it. Because in the big scheme, in the grander in the grander program, in the grander schedule of enterprise wide stuff, it doesn't mean anything. But at the project level, it means a lot.
Yes, exactly. One of the ways I try to communicate part of that is I say, as a project manager, try not to get drawn down into the work because part of your job really is to not do the work so that your
Mhm.
schedule is free so you can fight the fires, so you can go communicate with the stakeholders, so you can do what is necessary to assure project success. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, we as the profession evolves, I think that a lot of people are forgetting that your job is more than the Gantt charts, more than the scheduling, more than the biweekly review meetings where you sit in front of the firing squad. It's all that communication, all the greasing the wheels, all the negotiations that go on, all the horse trading, all the, like you said, to go back to that Ford example, Alan gave the resources that that PM needed to fix the problem because he didn't know how to fix it, but he knew who to go to fix it. And I've run into that personally in my projects was I knew nothing about logistics and international shipping in a project I was working on, but I was pointed to one person in the logistics department and then eventually got around to the person that I needed who knew everything there was to know. And then when I asked her questions, she was like, I've never done this before. Let me research that and get back to you. And then she became my go to person for the international shipping of the product that we were dealing with because logistics was just as important as installation. Because if we couldn't get them in and out, then we couldn't sell them.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the PM's job.
And those are the kinds of stories I say we are our own worst PR people because we'll sit up in front of in a review meeting and we'll talk about the status, we'll talk about everything that's going on, but we'll gloss over the massive risks that we alleviated by liaising and backdoor dealing and doing all these different things to save millions of dollars. And we just gloss over that like it never happened because that's just part of the job. But those are the kinds of things you want to be telling to the executives to know, oh, they're earning their six-figure paycheck.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a different job than implementation or execution. Yeah, exactly.
So now is the time where we get to the personalized question for you because every guest gets one. And it's very specific and tailored to you. So early on in your career, you rolled out a payroll system for the Canadian government, right?
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, a long time ago. Yeah.
Roughly how many people were you impacting with that paycheck system?
45.
Okay. So now, was it more nerve wracking to make sure that everyone got paid the right amount on time with that system than it is going in front of executives and arguing over why they want to take your budget?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I'm gonna say the second, going in front of the executives. And the reason is when we rolled that system out, we knew it had to be error-free. And so we did all sorts of little things, running in parallel, any financial system, it's not double accounting, but whatever the word, you run them in parallel, you
Mhm.
make sure it's at
Redundancies.
redundancy. Yeah, exactly. So I wasn't too worried about that. And, I had time. We didn't have to deploy it if it wasn't working. I must say, the health information system project I worked on, for example, there was some strong personalities at my monthly heartbeat. And I did, uh, I found that nerve wracking because I don't, I find I think we all do. I'm not unique here, but I find it difficult to keep your cool and keep things on a productive fashion when somebody thinks it's a competition and
Mm.
whoever attacks the most is going to win. For example, and I did have, without naming some names, of course, I did have one or two key people. There was always a lot of people in that room. The customer would bring all their leads along, so there could be 8 to 12 people in that room. So that monthly heartbeat, I found a little bit nervous making. Now, uh, we may get into this in the Patreon section when we talk about how to talk to these sorts of folks, but ideally, there are ways to minimize that problem,
Mhm.
specific phraseology and ways to manage that. And I learned that over time, and I try to teach that and pass that on. And we can talk about that later. But I tried to create a better environment with my teams than I sometimes encountered with higher groups, particularly in aerospace, where you can have some strong personalities. So yeah, I found that nervous making not not as bad as going on stage as Bruce Springsteen in front of 50,000 people, but yeah, I find it nervous making.
Well, I think, we talk about nerves and being nervous about things, and it all comes with time because I think about when I was in the military, my first training exercise or my first jump versus my last jump. And there's the 10, pick your cliche, there's the 10,000 hour rule, but there's actually a lot of research that backs up before you become an expert. I think it's like I've heard it with, I think it's with skydiving. It's by like your 500th jump is the most dangerous time to be jumping because
Mhm.
you've gotten, you've gotten the basic proficiencies out of the way. So you're no longer extra nervous, extra checking everything. You haven't become an expert yet, but you've started to let your guard down. So that's when complacency kills and complacency becomes the problem because you're not an expert yet, but you're also not a novice. You're in that gray area in the middle. And that's, you know, not just in skydiving, but in most things in life, that's where the most accidents happen because you're not that good, but you think you are.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. First thing I'll say is you've got a lot more guts than I do. I could not
Well,
jump out of a plane.
I did not skydive. I did military parachuting. There is a difference
Oh,
because
okay, fair enough. Right.
that's the static line style jumping. But I listened to a podcaster who skydives and he's talked about that. And, you know, you, we pick up these different cues from different people and build your own personal story and theory around different things you learn. But that's kind of the best example I can give because
Mhm,
when you first, I've never skydived, but if you think about it, your first handful of jumps, you're going to be checking everything twice, making sure everything's good, looking at everything three times. You're not enjoying it because you're paranoid.
mhm,
Then a shift happens as you're doing something where you start being more relaxed. You start enjoying it.
mhm.
You start being more comfortable. And that's where the most dangerous point is not there. But then when you pass that point and then you get into expert level, then you stay calm when malfunctions happen and when mistakes happen and all that. But it's that middle gray zone is where the most susceptibility to the biggest problems occurs. And we can use that in project management too, in any project. We've all been there.
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me of the saying, I forget who said it, but somebody said, maybe it was an opera singer or somebody, said every time they go on stage, they have butterflies. And if
Hmm.
they don't have them, they get nervous because they might not
Yep.
do a good performance. Every time I teach, I have butterflies. I had some butterflies before we started this podcast. So and that's probably a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, I joke that before I go into any meeting, it could be the same executives I've talked to for years. You can always hear your heart in your ears
Mhm.
and and then you're up there talking, you get into your flow zone of your talks, and then all of a sudden you're okay
Yeah,
until you get that one question of, so explain to me why we're doing this again.
right. I wasn't prepared for
Well, it's like the Bobs. What would you say you do here?
right. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great place for us to wrap, and I'll hand the floor over to you. Tell the audience where they can find you, what you're up to, all that good stuff.
Thank you very much. So The Institute for Practical Project Management, IFPPM, is at ifppm.org. It's easy to sign up to. You can download all the resources for free, the 3 books, the Magical Devices version. It's all free. Don't have to pay anything. There's the $40 for the courses and for the certification if you want. And if you're already an expert project manager, you could go up there, register, take the exam, and an hour from now have your DPPM certification. Put it on your resume. The thing I'd ask people is if they find any value in it, pass it on. Just email the resources off to other people, particularly nonprofits and other areas. What I haven't mentioned is it's free for all nonprofits. You put your domain in our database, and everything is free for all nonprofits. So we really want to help build on that PMI framework and provide some practical step-by-step implementation applied advice. So enjoy, folks. I hope you find some value in it.
And I'll have links to all that stuff in the show notes.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why we're here, is to try and make this a better place for project managers, not just more boring, and I like that the magic institute that you created there for your example.
Yeah. It took me 6 months, but I'm kind of happy with it now. It's like a complete.
So I got to ask, why didn't they just use spells to make it all happen instead of actually having to do the work?
That's a good point. I had to come up with requirements for these devices, and I can't remember what they were now, but it was something like it must be able to affect time and space across a minimum distance of 30 meters. Stuff like this. But you're a good point. It should have been physician heal thyself. Just, we need a version 3 facility.
Well, then you could have gone into how do they create the spell for it.
That would be a great project right there.
And last thing before we wrap is you were talking about the Post-it notes for your flowcharts. One of the things I've noticed more than anything is when you map out a process or a project or whatever it is, when you physically map it out, whether it's on a physical whiteboard, a digital whiteboard, whatever it is, you see the flaws because it's right there. Because someone is going to ask, how do you go from here to here with no intermediary? And it's a exercise that everyone looks at as a time suck, but it adds value later because it reduces the gotchas, because everyone's staring at the same thing, not a project plan with 800 steps that I'm only concerned with what's my lane in the project plan.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. Thank you for that. It's one of the most important things of all. And unfortunately, Gantt schedule tools have severely negatively impacted that step in the PM process. I'll never forget one of my first bosses. I put a list of steps in a system architecture job. And I said, so here's the work for this project. And he said, well, where's the flow chart? And I said, well, the flow chart's more or less understood, but here's the actual work. And he said to me, Bill, I don't want to look at it until you flow charted it. And I said to myself, what a nut. What a detail-oriented nut. So I went back and I flow charted it, and it all changed. Exactly. Yep. That precedence diagram is what makes the Gantt schedule and critical path long and accurate. Yes, flow charting. How much more simple could it get? Exactly, Trevor. Exactly.
It's just like the Gemba walk in Six Sigma, that you've got to go out there and physically see the work before you plan out the best practice, because what looks good on paper doesn't always look good in the real world.
Exactly.
So with that, I want to thank the Patreon subscribers for their continuing helping fund the show. Most importantly, I want to thank the listeners, because you guys are the ones that keep this thing going and keep this thing around. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow on all the major platforms. It's free to do. I also have an Instagram now, so let's get that going. That's going to have clips from all shows on it. And with that, I'll end like I always do. May all your deliverables be on time, your budget's in the black, and your scope not creeping. For Bill Stewart, I'm still Trevor, and I'm still the disgruntled PM. Thanks for listening, everyone.